Hello, and welcome to part two of our ancient Rome segment, the rise and fall of an empire. And hopefully, you have your notes ready to go. Again, please make sure it's part two, the rise and fall of the empire. That starts at the top with the Punic Wars. So let's begin. All right, so the Punic Wars, as you can see, starts in 264 BC and lasts until 146 BC or BCE. Yes, we are going backwards, so please understand that when we are in this time period, that the numbers go down from higher to smaller. Um, BCE stands for Before Common Era, and some students come up with the backwards counting everyone. So just keep that in mind. So when we talk about wars, we got to know who is fighting, and we're looking at all of Italy, which is Rome, going against this city known as Carthage. That's in North Africa. If you look at a map, Rome and Carthage are really truly right smack. Both of them are smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Obviously, Rome's in Italy and Carthage is in North Africa. Carthage is a lot older, has been around a lot longer than Rome, and they had already established a presence in the Western Mediterranean. And so, what ends up happening, of course, there's going to be conflict with Rome growing and needing more land, space, and resources. So too will come the conflict. And again, that is the reason why they're competing for trade on the Mediterranean Sea. You got to know why they are fighting. Short-term results: Rome does win. There's a series of three wars, and Rome wins those, completely controlling the Mediterranean. Again, that's a short-term. Long-term effect would be the fact that Rome grows not only with expansion of trade, but also its financial power, its wealth. So, looking at what Western Mediterranean looked like, in purple you have the Carthage area land, the land that's controlled by Carthage, and then in red you see the Italian peninsula where Rome is. When you look at this map, Carthage looks like it has a lot of control, which it does, and Rome is just concentrated there on the Italian peninsula. However, if you're Rome, which where's your the most direct threat from Carthage? To me, it's these three islands right here, and that becomes the focal point for the first Punic War. And so, what Rome does is it ventures out, and as you can see, the colors have changed now, and it has established itself controlling the island of Corsica, Sardinia, as well as Sicily. This was a huge smack in the face to Carthage. They lose financial aid from these islands as well as military advancements. I mean, think about as far as these islands and how it helped with the navy. And if you're Rome, it's a huge benefit because you have this safety buffer, if you will. And so Rome starts loading these islands up with military for defenses and building up its forts along the borders that might be threatened um, by the Carthaginian forces. So that ends the First Punic War, victory for Rome. Yay. So, Second Punic War. Carthage is still upset regarding how they lost to those islands to Rome. And so this young man, as you can see there, his name is Hannibal, is now in charge of the Carthaginian army. His father was in charge of the army during the First Punic War, so he's got a personal vendetta against Rome. He not only trying to protect his country, his homeland, but he also wants to kind of protect his family's name, give that respect back that his father lost. So, Second Punic War is truly about revenge. And what Hannibal does, he decides that the best move would be not to directly attack Rome and try to get back those islands, but sneak through the north. So Hannibal takes his army west across North Africa, crosses the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain in Europe, and then they travel east northeast into southern France. At that point, they then find a path through the Alps, that mountain range that we talked about in the previous PowerPoint, the previous video. And you can see in this image, it's a very cold, rough climate. Hannibal does lose a large amount of his army due to exposure to the elements as well as the elephants as well. They weren't really prepared for the environment going through the Alps. However, this maneuver did catch Rome off guard. The Carthaginian army was really close to seizing Rome until this guy, General Scipio, goes and leads what's left of the Roman army that's not on the islands and to try and stop Hannibal. At this point, Hannibal's army has taken a lot of loss due to the long journey through the Alps, and so they kind of are an equal match with Hannibal and Scipio's army at the Battle of Cannae. At this point, Scipio decides to give Hannibal an ultimatum and basically says, if you advance any closer to Rome, that I would give the orders for all the forces of the Roman army on the islands to attack the city of Carthage. And due to this threat, Hannibal backs off and reports back to Carthage to protect its city. And that was the last major advancement that Hannibal and the Carthaginian forces had towards the city of Rome. So there's a map of Hannibal and his journey with his army through the Alps and how close they truly got to the city of Rome. So the Third Punic War, basically Rome is tired of Carthage kind of being a thorn in their side. And with Carthage still kind of struggling with the defeat of the Second Punic War and how much the Second War took on the Carthaginian resources, both in personnel and then military supplies. Rome decides to attack the city directly. They destroy and burn the city to the ground. The Carthaginian forces cannot defend the city itself. So Carthage is doomed. And for Rome, this makes a pretty strong message to those that oppose them. When we think about it, Carthage has been there for a while. Here's this new kid on the block, Rome, and all of a sudden they put the smack down on Carthage. If you're Greece or Egypt, what does this say about Rome? Do you think you're going to pick a fight with Rome? As Kevin from Home Alone would say, I don't think so. So let's move on from the Punic War. So now Rome, in its expanding republic, has grown to control the entire Mediterranean basin. Remember, we talked about the basin earlier, the coast around the Mediterranean Sea. So not only did they get the land from Carthage, but now they are getting alliances, or making alliances with Greece, with Egypt, with areas such as Judea and other parts of the eastern Mediterranean nations. So all of a sudden, Rome becomes huge. Now, what happens with this? Well, Rome wants to bring everybody else up to their level. If they are controlling these regions throughout the Mediterranean basin, they need to make sure that those new areas are equal to them. So improvements of roads, improvements of buildings, and things of that nature. An upgrade, if you will, to the Roman standard of culture. So a lot of these areas will have a huge influence on or from Roman culture. And in turn, what does Rome get? Rome gets a huge boost in trade. Their economy goes through the roof. They get all these natural resources from all these different areas. And in turn, they gain power. Money equals power. So as you can see, this is one view by the 2nd century BC of how big the Roman Republic was. You see how they have gained that foothold there in Carthage and Africa. You can see that Macedonia and Greece have now fallen under the Roman Republic as well. So most of Southern Europe is going to have a lot of influence from Rome. So the question is, the aftermath of war, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it just truly depends on your perspective. So, as we've just talked about from a land perspective, from a financial perspective, and depending upon who you are in the Roman Republic, it's a good thing. However, there are social and economic changes that are coming. So, what happens is after the Punic Wars, you're going to have a large amount of enslaved people coming from Carthage. Remember, we talked about slavery and how slavery is not based on race, but based on who you fought for or fought against. So, what happens to those people that were captured? They become slaves. And so, all of a sudden, you have this huge amount of enslaved people coming into the Republic. So, again, the big thing about slavery during this time period still is not based on race, but who your alliances were. So, unfortunately for the people of Carthage, they lost. Now, for these wealthy landowners, what starts to happen is they see this as a financial benefit. I only have to pay one time instead of monthly payments, instead of hiring people to work my fields or work in my industry. So, for those wealthy landowners and business owners, this becomes a financial boost. Now, what happens to those people who they used to hire? Well, they're now unemployed. So instead of me and my family that have been working for you and your family for generations, all of a sudden now I'm kicked to the streets, unemployed. I've lost my house. My family's starving. I've got to move to the city. I've got to find a job or something to help my family. This is the beginning of the downfall of the Roman Republic. You start to see a large amount, a large amount of poverty, a large amount of crime in the cities. You see what's called inflation. All right, we have deflation of Roman currency, meaning its buying power is now less than what it used to be. So your dollar sweet tea at McDonald's is now a $2 sweet tea. That inflation of price is going to cause an economic hardship, especially even more so for those unemployed citizens that have moved to the city. So what starts to happen? Well, these three guys, not Mo, Curly, and Larry, but these are the first triumvirates of Rome. They are Julius Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey. Some people call him Pompey. Excuse me. However, for Julius Caesar and Crassus, they're military generals. Pompey's a politician. He has the money. Now, little side note, during this time period, Rome did not have a huge national, if you will, army. What you had is an individual army. So, what I mean by that is Julius Caesar, who had lots of money, went into these cities, found a bunch of people without jobs, and was like, hey, look, you look strong. You have a family. Would you like money? Of course. Would you like to support your family and work? Of course. All right. Well, I will give you a monthly salary if you pledge to me your allegiance and you will fight for me in my army. And that's how Caesar and Crassus build up their own personal army. Keep that in the back of your head for the meantime. So, what did the first triumvirate do? Well, these three gentlemen decided to join together and divide up the responsibilities to help try and save the Republic. And so, for some, they didn't feel like following through, specifically Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar wasn't the type of guy to sit behind a desk. He was a go getter, he was a general, he was a military mind. So, what he decides to do, he leaves Rome, travels north across the Alps into what is then called Gaul, but today we call France. And he conquers France. He goes even further north to this island called Britain and conquers Britain and adds them to the Republic. Now, this was all done without any support of the two guys. But look what Caesar does. He gets the public to support him by sending letters about his adventures. And I can probably bet the farm that those letters did not quite tell exactly the truth as to what happened. They probably were very elaborated stories to go and glorify Caesar. Well, if you are living in a town and you hear about this letter and about this general going out and fighting the enemy and adding more land and territory to the Republic, he's going to become a superstar. And that's what happens with Julius Caesar. He becomes a huge, huge icon. And what happens, it makes him very popular with the citizens throughout the Republic. And the power lies with the citizens. Think about that. And so what happens is Crassus and Pompey get scared. They feel as if that if Caesar comes back home, that little perfect triumvirate of theirs is going to be lopsided. And so what they tell Caesar is they say to him that if he crosses the Rubicon, that there's going to be civil war. That Crassus will take his army and fight Julius Caesar and his. Well, of course, Julius Caesar being Julius Caesar decides to cross the Rubicon. You can't keep him away from Rome. Rome was where he lived. Rome was where his family was. Okay? So it makes total sense. No, I'm going to go home. You're not going to tell me not to go home. Can you imagine that? Someone telling you, don't go home? Whatever. So this conflict becomes known as a civil war. Romans versus Romans. Julius Caesar versus Crassus. So this, again, is truly the beginning of the end for the Republic. So Pompey runs off. Remember, Pompey is just a politician. Crassus does fight, and Caesar does defeat him. So because of that, Julius Caesar is the only one left of the first triumvirate. So he claims to himself to be the dictator of the Roman Republic. Remember, we're a republic still. The Roman Republic is still in existence at the time of Julius Caesar. And so he continues to expand Rome throughout Western Europe. So, as I said, it's still a republic. You still have the assembly and you still have the Senate, but they meet under a dictatorship? Do you think that's fair? Well, what ends up happening, the Senate starts to worry that Julius Caesar might dismantle the Senate. And he might become more of a monarch or of a king. And that's not what Rome wanted. So they are fearing that he's going to become too powerful. So what do you think they're going to plan to do? Well, the Ides of March comes. And on March 15th, 44 BCE, Julius Caesar is scheduled to give a speech at the Senate with all the senators from the Republic. However, his poor wife, who had visited an oracle, some people call him a fortune teller, goes and is warned by the oracle that her husband needs to beware of the Ides of March. However, he does not listen to these warnings, and he goes and gives a speech. And Julius Caesar is stabbed at least 23 times by the senators and eventually dies on that day. Even his closest friend, Brutus, who was a general underneath Julius Caesar, who was promoted to become a senator by Julius Caesar himself, even stabs Julius Caesar, according to William Shakespeare, of course. So here's a famous painting of the downfall of Julius Caesar. So after Caesar's death, three more gentlemen step up and form a second triumvirate. And that is Mark Antony, some might see it as Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Lepidus, like Pompey, is a politician, very wealthy. Octavian and Mark Antony are military generals. However, the two of them were also best friends, and they ruled, or should say, they fought under Julius Caesar. However, Octavian had something special. Octavian was also the adopted nephew of Julius Caesar. And so there was a blood relationship between Octavian and Julius Caesar. So what ends up happening? Lo and behold, it comes to the light that Mark Antony knew about the conspiracy to kill Octavian's uncle. Now, Octavian is very upset, angry, disappointed, betrayed by Mark Antony. So there's another civil war. Mark Antony knows that there's no way that he's going to be having a fair trial anywhere on the Italian peninsula. So he takes his army and leaves and heads to Egypt. There, he meets a war between the princess and the prince of Egypt. He sides with the princess. Her name was Cleopatra. And so, with Mark Antony's help, Cleopatra becomes the queen of Egypt, defeating her brother. Octavian eventually gets word that Mark Antony is there and heads down to Egypt. But before Octavian gets there with his forces, Mark Antony commits suicide. And hearing the news about his suicide, Cleopatra does so as well. And so once both of them are defeated, Lepidus just runs away and hides. He's a politician. And what ends up happening is Octavian becomes emperor. Not dictator. He takes it one step further than his uncle. He becomes the emperor of Rome. And in honor of his uncle / father, he saw Julius Caesar as a father figure. He takes his name and he renames himself. He goes from Octavian to Augustus Caesar, or you might also see it as Caesar Augustus. At this point in time, the word Caesar is now the title for emperor. So keep that in mind. Anytime you see Caesar whatever, that means emperor. So again, Caesar Augustus or Augustus Caesar means emperor. At this point, when Octavian becomes emperor, the Republic is now dead and the Roman Empire is born. Now, what happens under this new Roman Empire? You have what's called the Pax Romana. The Pax Romana is Latin for Roman peace, and it lasts for about 200 years. All right, there's 200 years of peace within the empire. There's still conflicts on the borders. You're still expanding the empire. So you are having war outside along the borders. However, within the empire is nothing but peace, prosperity. It's unified because of this military and the emperor, and it just grows. However, there is a change. What's going to happen is the emperor, also known as Caesar, can now select who he wants to be his successor, who's going to be the next emperor of Rome. This does not have to be a son. It does not have to be blood related. So what this does, this brings competition amongst family and friends of the emperor. Pretty crazy. However, three words that sum up the Pax Romana: unity, stability, and prosperity. It's unified, it's stable, and people have wealth. So, but you look at this map and you see the transition from the dictatorship of Julius Caesar in the Roman Republic to the time of Augustus Caesar. Roman Empire is growing tremendously. So, how does this Pax Romana thing affect the economy? Well, again, it's a uniform money system. No matter where you traveled, the money that you had in Rome, if you traveled to Egypt, you could use the same currency. If you traveled to Britain, you could use the same Roman currency. So again, it cuts down on problems with exchange rates. It helps expand the trade. It makes trade a lot easier. You are guaranteed safe travel and trade on the Roman roads. There were guard posts on your major trade routes to help protect from bandits and thievery. And what this does is promotes prosperity and stability to the Roman economy. So again, you have a sense of protection, you have a sense of pride, you have this huge boost in the economy. Here are is how big Rome was. All the different provinces, all the different locations throughout the Roman Republic. I'm sorry, Empire, excuse me, Roman Empire. Socially, how does it impact of the Pax Romana? What did it have on the Roman Empire? Well, because of stability in social classes, you didn't have a conflict. There, it was a lot of good things happening because of this stability. You had an increase on what truly meant to have a family. You didn't have to have three, four jobs in order to put food on the table. You didn't have to worry about where you're going to put your head down to get some rest, to get some sleep. Also, during this time, we have some political effects of the Pax Romana. You have what's called the civil service, which you probably have heard about back in our China unit, which means that you start having government jobs. The government started offering people jobs. Again, part of that system to help put money on the table, put money in the pocket to put food on the table. That's what I meant. Also, use a sense of law that's uniform throughout the empire. So it's you have to have a unified law. You can't go and do one thing in one location that's illegal somewhere else. That's what causes problems and unrest. So what starts to happen to Rome? Well, it's too big. It's way too hard to defend. It costs a lot of money. And because of that, it's too expensive. You're taxing, and the value of that money is dropping. So it becomes extremely hard for people to defend. So what happens with the military then? If it's hard to defend, what are you doing with the military? Why is that a problem? Well, what's going to happen is your military is going to start including foreigners, people not with an alliance with Rome. They're going to start seeing where a lack of discipline is going to cause a weakened military. Moral decay occurs when you have a team and you know that they're losing. You can just tell that their heads are down, they're kicking the dirt, and you're just going to keep pushing. And that's what starts to happen with Rome. What you start to see is people start losing faith in Rome as an entity, as an empire, as a government. People don't trust it anymore. And in turn, that emphasis on family starts to lose, or starts to drop, starts to fade away as well. And I think the camel that truly, the needle that, try again, the straw that broke the camel's back, that's the phrase I was looking for, is invasions. The invasions throughout the borders of Rome truly fractured this massive empire. All throughout the borders, and it's almost, I don't know if it was planned this way or how they thought about it, but these attacks were systematically done in a way that caused the Roman Empire to drop to its knees. However, during all this conflict, there was a sense of hope by Emperor Diocletian. Diocletian believed that by dividing the empire into a western and eastern half, that it would help make it easier to manage. That the western half controls its borders and taxes its people, and the eastern half will protect it. Under Emperor Constantine, he decided to move the capital away from Rome. Rome was becoming too let me see what's the best way to put it, too weak, too fragile, and he knew that by a certain amount of time that Rome was going to collapse. So he decides to take this Greek seaport known as Byzantium, all right, which is to the south of the Black Sea, and make it into the new capital. And he renames it after himself, Constantinople. So this city becomes a thriving city. It's at a great crossroads for trade and very well protected. So as you can see, what has happened to this empire, this has truly been split. Even here in North Africa, where Carthage was, that was part. All this here, and this pinkish color is the Western Roman Empire. This orangish color is the Eastern Roman Empire. Here is Constantinople, as you can see here. Here's Rome. So, do you think this helps? Yes and no. What ends up happening is the Western Roman Empire collapses in 476. When we say it falls or collapses, we're talking about the empire as a government entity. Don't think about it as the people were wiped out. Don't think about it as there was no one living in Western Europe or Western part of the empire. Barbaric invasions came in and crumbled it. The Goths, a group of people from Scandinavia, what we would later on call the Vikings, Norway, Sweden, Finland. The Vandals, coming in from North Africa. The Huns, led by a guy named Attila from Central Asia. And the Franks, that will come in from Northern Europe. So the Huns will eventually settle in Central Europe and create their own little country called Hungary or Hungaria. The Franks, gee, what country sounds like Franks? Maybe France. So here is a map of what these invasions look like. Pretty chaotic. Now, go back and think back to our Greece unit. What was the problem geographically with Greece and the Balkan Peninsula? If poor soil, rocky soil, mountainous lands came to mind, you are correct. These invaders weren't looking for gold or wealth. They're looking for food. They're looking for rich lands for farming. And that was all you had over here in the West. So that's truly, if you think about it, there's really no one really stopped over here. They walked through, in my opinion, they probably walked through, saw how bad the soil was, and bolted out of there. So here's some paintings of what the collapse of Rome possibly looked like. So what happens to the eastern half? Well, the eastern half lasts for another 1,000 years. However, it wasn't called the Eastern Roman Empire. It was known as the Byzantine Empire, led by these two individuals, Justinian and his wife, Theodora. And this will conclude part 2 of our Rome unit. Our next episode, part 3, will be about the legacy and what Rome left behind for us. Thank you for tuning in. Please stay safe. And until next time, thank you for viewing.